I spent my whole life begging my parents to see me, but to them, I was invisible. Every birthday forgotten, every achievement ignored. I was nothing in my own family. So I left. Alone. Broken. I built everything from zero. Years later, they called me. Desperate. Needing me. Not love. Not regret. Just need. And that's when it hit me. They didn't lose me. I outgrew them. What would you do in my place? Comment below. I used to think being ignored was normal, like maybe I just hadn't done enough to be seen. So I tried harder. I spoke louder, smiled bigger, achieved more, anything to earn even a second of their attention. But no matter what I did, nothing changed. The silence stayed. And slowly, it got louder than any words they never said. At first, I told myself it didn't hurt, that I didn't need them, that I was strong enough on my own. But the truth? Every time they chose my brother over me, something inside me cracked. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just small fractures, building over time. And then one day, I stopped trying. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood something terrifying. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being replaced. That realization hit differently. It wasn't pain anymore, it was clarity. Cold. Sharp. Unavoidable. And once you see the truth like that, you can't unsee it. So I made a decision. Quiet. Final. I would stop begging for a place in a family that never made space for me. Instead, I would build a life where I didn't have to ask to be loved. And here's the part no one warns you about. When you finally walk away, when you finally choose yourself, everything starts to change. Not immediately, not easily, but undeniably. Because the moment you stop chasing validation is the moment you start becoming someone they can no longer ignore. And maybe that's where my story really begins, not when they ignored me, but when I finally understood who I was without them. My name is Mia. I'm 28 years old, born and raised in the United States, in what most people would call a normal family. On the outside, everything looked perfect: 2 parents, a nice house, stability. But behind closed doors, things felt very different. Because in my family, love wasn't given freely. It was measured, earned, and somehow, I was always falling short. I wasn't the problem child. I didn't rebel. I didn't cause trouble. If anything, I did everything right. Good grades, quiet attitude, always trying to please. And yet, no matter how hard I tried, I always felt like I was standing just outside something I could never enter. Like I was close, but never chosen. At first, I thought it was just in my head. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I expected too much. But then, the patterns became impossible to ignore. The comparisons. The silence. The way my achievements disappeared the moment they were mentioned. And slowly, a truth started forming, one I didn't want to accept. I wasn't just different. I was unnecessary. That realization didn't break me all at once. It settled in quietly, like something that had always been there, waiting for me to notice. And once I did, everything began to shift. Because when you finally see your place in someone else's world, you also start questioning if you even belong there at all. And once I started questioning where I belonged, the answer became painfully clear. In my family, there was always a center of attention, and it was never me. It was my older brother, Daniel. Daniel wasn't just loved. He was celebrated. Every small achievement of his turned into a family event. A decent game at school? Dinner out. A passing grade? Praised for days. Meanwhile, I could spend weeks preparing for something important, and when it finally happened, it barely existed. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was normal. Older siblings get more attention, right? That's what I kept repeating in my head. But deep down, something didn't feel right. Because this wasn't just attention, it was preference. Clear, consistent, unavoidable. And the more I noticed it, the harder it became to unsee. At dinner, conversations revolved around Daniel. His plans, his future, his problems. I would sit there, sometimes trying to speak, only to be interrupted or, worse, ignored completely. My words would hang in the air for a second, then disappear like they were never said. That silence? It said everything. I started testing it. Small things at first. Sharing good news. Waiting to see if they'd react. Sometimes they nodded. Sometimes they didn't even look up. But when Daniel spoke, everything stopped. That's when the realization hit harder than ever. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that I wasn't the one they chose. And that difference changes everything. Because when you grow up in a house where love feels selective, you don't just feel left out, you feel replaceable. Like no matter what you do, someone else will always matter more. That thought stayed with me. Quiet but constant. And over time, it didn't just hurt. It reshaped me. And as that feeling grew stronger, it started showing up in moments I could no longer ignore. Not big, dramatic events, but small, quiet moments that should have meant everything. Moments that slowly proved just how invisible I really was. Like my birthdays. At first, they were simple. A cake, a quick, happy birthday, nothing special, but still something. But over time, even that faded. One year, they forgot completely. No cake. No message. Not even a glance. I remember sitting in my room that night, staring at my phone, waiting, just waiting for someone to remember. No one did. I told myself it didn't matter. That birthdays were childish anyway. But deep down, it did matter. It always did. Because it wasn't about the celebration, it was about being seen. Then there were my achievements. The times I actually did something worth noticing. I once won a regional writing competition. It meant everything to me. I came home excited, heart racing, hoping, just hoping this time would be different. My mom looked up for a second, smiled faintly, and said, "That's nice." Then she turned back to Daniel, asking about his game. That moment stayed with me. Not because of what she said, but because of how quickly I disappeared again. And the worst part? It became normal. I stopped expecting reactions. Stopped sharing good news. Stopped believing anything I did could ever matter in that house. Until one day, a thought hit me harder than anything before. Maybe I wasn't forgotten. Maybe I was never important to begin with. And once that thought settled in, everything inside me began to change in ways I didn't even realize at first. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet. Slow. Almost invisible, just like me. At first, I kept trying. Out of habit, maybe. Or hope. I would still speak at dinner, still share small things about my day, still look for some kind of reaction. But each time, the silence came faster. Heavier. More final. So I started pulling back. Just a little. Then more. I laughed less. Spoke less. Expected less. And strangely, it felt easier. Not better. Just easier. Because when you expect nothing, you don't get disappointed. That became my protection. My way of surviving in a place that never felt like home. But that numbness came with a cost. I stopped celebrating myself. Even in private. Achievements felt empty. Good news felt pointless. It was like I had trained my own mind to believe that nothing I did deserved attention, not even from me. That's when things shifted deeper. It wasn't just how they saw me anymore. It was how I started seeing myself. And that's the most dangerous part. Because once you begin to believe you don't matter, you stop fighting for your place. You stop asking to be heard. You stop showing up fully. Until one day, I caught myself thinking something I never thought I would. Maybe disappearing. is easier than being ignored. And maybe that's why, when the opportunity finally came, it felt unreal. Like something that didn't belong to me. But it did. I had earned it. It started with a letter. Plain envelope. Nothing special. I almost didn't open it right away. But when I did, everything changed. I had been accepted. Not just accepted, awarded a full scholarship to a university I had only dreamed about. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the words, rereading them again and again to make sure they were real. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. This was it. My way out. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something different. Hope. I imagined walking into the house, showing them the letter, finally seeing their faces light up. Finally hearing the words I had waited for my whole life. We're proud of you. Just once. That's all I wanted. So I went home, holding that letter like it meant everything because it did. I told them. I waited. A pause. A glance. Then, nothing. My mom nodded slightly, distracted. My dad barely reacted. And within seconds, the conversation shifted back to Daniel. His plans. His future. His life. Just like that, my moment disappeared. But this time, it hit differently. Because I realized something I hadn't before. This wasn't just another thing they ignored. This was my future. And suddenly, it became clear. If I stayed, nothing would ever change. So for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt ready. And just when I thought I was finally ready to step forward, they pulled me right back into the same silence I had known my entire life. But this time, it wasn't quiet, it was sharp. Cold. Intentional. I tried again. I explained what the scholarship meant. How hard I had worked. How this could change everything for me. I thought maybe they just didn't understand. Maybe if I said it the right way, they would finally see me. But they didn't. My mom sighed, like I was making things complicated. She asked how far the school was. Not out of curiosity, but concern. Not for me. For Daniel. Who's going to help around here, she said. That question hit harder than anything. Not, are you happy? Not, what do you want? Just, what about him? My dad finally spoke. But not to congratulate me. Not to support me. He simply said, out-of-state schools are expensive. Don't expect us to help. I stood there, holding a full scholarship, and still being treated like a burden. And then came the moment that changed everything. My mom looked at me, completely serious, and said, if you leave, don't expect things to stay the same. For a second, I didn't understand. Then it sank in. That wasn't concern. That was a warning. A line drawn. A choice forced. Stay and remain invisible. Or leave and lose them completely. The room felt smaller. The air heavier. But for the first time, I didn't feel confused. I felt clear. Because in that moment, they didn't just fail to support me. They showed me exactly where I stood. And just when I thought I had already heard the worst, they went further. Not louder. Not angrier. Just colder. And somehow, that made it hurt even more. I stood there, still holding that letter, still hoping, some small part of me refusing to let go. Maybe they didn't mean it like that. Maybe there was still something left unsaid. Something softer. Something human. So I asked. Quietly. Carefully. Do you want me to stay? For a second, no one answered. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. And then my mom spoke. No hesitation. No emotion. If you walk out that door, she said, don't come back. Just like that. No anger. No raised voice. Just a sentence. Simple. Final. But it hit like everything collapsing at once. I felt it in my chest first. Then my throat. Then everywhere. Like something inside me was breaking, not loudly, but completely. Because in that moment, it wasn't just rejection. It was removal. I wasn't being pushed away. I was being erased. And the worst part? No one stopped her. My dad said nothing. Daniel didn't even look at me. It was as if that sentence made perfect sense to them. As if I had already been gone long before I ever left. That's when it happened. Something in me went quiet. Not weak, quiet. Controlled. Certain. The pain didn't disappear. It changed. Because for the first time, I wasn't asking to be chosen anymore. I was choosing to leave. And once the decision settled in, everything moved faster than I expected. Not chaotic, just inevitable. Like my life had been waiting for this exact moment to finally begin. I didn't argue. I didn't cry in front of them. I just turned around and walked to my room. Closed the door. And for the first time, the silence felt different. Not empty, but final. I packed slowly. 2 suitcases. That was all I had. Clothes. A few books. The acceptance letter. I kept looking around the room, wondering if I'd feel something, sadness, regret, hesitation. But nothing came. That scared me more than anything. Because it meant there was nothing left to hold on to. I walked out with my bags. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. No, be careful. No, call us. Not even a goodbye. Just silence. Again. But this time, I didn't wait for it to break. I stepped outside. The air felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just me. My hands were shaking, but my steps didn't stop. One step, then another. And just like that, I crossed the line they drew. Behind me was everything I had ever known. In front of me, nothing certain. But here's the twist no one talks about. For the first time in my life, that nothing didn't feel empty. It felt free. Terrifying, yes. Unstable, absolutely. But also real. Because for once, my life wasn't being decided for me. I wasn't being ignored anymore. I was walking away. And that freedom came with a price I wasn't ready for. Because the moment I stepped out on my own, reality didn't wait. It hit fast. Hard. Unforgiving. At first, it felt like an adventure. New city. New life. No one to ignore me anymore. But that illusion didn't last long. Bills started piling up. Rent. Food. Tuition gaps. Even with the scholarship, life wasn't free. So I worked. 1 job turned into 2. Then 3. Morning shifts at a cafe. Late nights cleaning offices. Weekends doing anything that paid. There were days I barely slept. Nights I fell asleep fully dressed, too exhausted to even think. And still, it wasn't enough. There were moments I stood in a grocery store, calculating every dollar, putting things back one by one, choosing what I could survive without. Hunger became familiar. Not dramatic. Just constant. But here's the part that changed everything. No one was coming to save me. Not my parents. Not anyone. And somehow, that realization didn't break me. It sharpened me. Because every struggle became proof. Every long shift, every empty night, every silent victory, it all meant something. Not to them, but to me. For the first time, my life had weight. Real consequences. Real effort. Real growth. And slowly, something unexpected started happening. I stopped feeling like the invisible girl. Not because the world suddenly noticed me, but because I finally noticed myself. I saw what I could survive, what I could build, what I could become without anyone's permission. And that changed everything. Because the girl they ignored, she didn't disappear. She learned how to live without them. And as I learned how to survive without them, something else happened that I didn't plan, didn't announce, didn't even fully realize at first. I disappeared from their world. Not in a dramatic way. No final message. No goodbye call. Just silence, from both sides. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And somehow, neither of us reached out. At first, I kept checking my phone. Just in case. Maybe they'd call. Maybe they'd ask if I was okay. Even just once. Nothing. So I stopped checking. That was the real cut. Not anger. Not a fight. Just absence. I told myself it was mutual. That we had all moved on. But deep down, I knew the truth was sharper than that. I had left, but they had let me go. Completely. Effortlessly. And that realization hit harder than anything before. Because it meant one thing. I wasn't missed. Not even a little. That thought could have broken me. And for a moment, it almost did. There were nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I had ever mattered at all. If I had imagined every connection, every hope. But then something shifted. Again. If they could live without me so easily, then maybe I could learn to do the same. And that's when the silence changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It became power. Because the moment I stopped waiting for them to come back was the moment I truly moved forward. And once I stopped waiting, I finally had space to focus on something else. Myself. My future. My way out of everything I used to be. At first, it wasn't easy. My mind was still noisy, still haunted by old thoughts, old doubts. But I had one thing I never had before: control. No interruptions. No comparisons. No one telling me I wasn't enough. So I studied. Harder than ever. Late nights turned into early mornings. Coffee became routine. Exhaustion became normal. But this time, it felt different. Every hour I put in wasn't for approval. It was survival. It was escape. And slowly, results started showing. Grades improved. Professors noticed. Opportunities opened. Not because someone gave them to me, but because I earned them. That realization hit deep. For the first time in my life, my effort had a direct outcome. No one could ignore it. No one could take it away. And then came the moment that changed everything. I graduated. Top of my class. No applause from family. No proud smiles waiting for me. Just a stage, a name called, and silence where something used to hurt. But this time, it didn't. Because here's the twist. I didn't need them there. Not anymore. The girl who once begged to be seen had done something undeniable. Something real. And the most shocking part? I wasn't doing it to prove them wrong anymore. I was doing it because I finally believed I was worth it. And once I finally believed I was worth something, everything started to accelerate in ways I never expected. Not luck. Not coincidence. Momentum. I got my first job right after graduation. Entry level. Nothing glamorous. Long hours, low pay, constant pressure. But unlike before, I wasn't afraid of the struggle. I had lived through worse. So I worked. I stayed late when others left. Took on tasks no one wanted. Learned faster. Pushed harder. Not to impress anyone, but because I knew what it meant to have nothing. And people started noticing. At first, it was small. A compliment. A nod. Then bigger. More responsibility. More trust. More expectations. And here's where things shifted again. For the first time in my life, being seen didn't feel dangerous. It felt earned. Promotions came faster than I expected. One role turned into another. Then another. Each step higher, each challenge harder, but this time, I didn't shrink. I adapted. I grew. And then came the moment that shocked even me. I became one of the youngest managers in the company. That title meant more than just success. It was proof. Proof that everything they ignored was real. Proof that the girl they overlooked was capable of more than they ever believed. But here's the twist that changed everything. I didn't feel the need to tell them. Not a call. Not a message. Not even a thought of sharing it. Because somewhere along the way, their validation stopped mattering. And that realization hit harder than any promotion ever could. I had spent my entire childhood trying to be enough for them. And now, I was more than enough, without them even knowing. That's when it truly sank in. Success isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. It simply exists, whether they acknowledge it or not. And as that quiet success settled in, something even more unfamiliar began to take shape. Stability. Not the kind that looks perfect from the outside, but the kind you feel when nothing is about to collapse. At first, I didn't trust it. Every good thing felt temporary. Every calm moment felt like it was about to break. I had spent so long surviving that I didn't know how to just live. But slowly, piece by piece, my life started to hold. I moved into my own place. Not big, not luxurious, but mine. Every corner, every object, every silence, it all belonged to me. No comparisons. No tension. Just space. And that space changed me. I started building routines. Cooking my own meals. Coming home without dread. Waking up without that weight in my chest. Small things, but they felt unreal. Because for the first time, I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. I was safe. And that realization hit deeper than any success I had achieved before. But here's where it twisted again. Even with everything I had built, there were moments. Quiet ones. Late at night. Where a question would slip in. Why wasn't I enough for them? Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just there. And for a second, the old version of me would resurface. The one who still wanted answers. Still wanted closure. Still wanted to be chosen. But this time, something was different. I didn't chase that feeling. I didn't let it pull me back. Because I had already proven something far more important. I didn't need them to have a life. I had already built one. And just when I thought my life had finally settled into something steady, something I controlled, something I understood, it happened. A call. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, debating. I wasn't expecting anyone. No reason to answer. But something I couldn't explain, made me press accept. Hello. Silence. Then a voice. Familiar. Too familiar. My chest tightened instantly. It was my mom. For a second, I couldn't speak. Years of silence collapsed into that one moment. All the distance, all the absence, suddenly gone, replaced by a voice I hadn't heard in nearly a decade. But it didn't feel warm. It felt wrong. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't say she missed me. She went straight to the point. And that's when everything shifted. Her voice was different. Not cold this time, but shaky. Uncertain. Almost desperate. She told me things I never expected to hear. Daniel had lost everything. His business failed. Debts piled up. My dad was sick. Seriously sick. Medical bills. Financial pressure. Everything collapsing. And then came the moment that hit harder than anything before. We need your help. Not, we want to see you. Not, we're sorry. Just need. And in that second, time seemed to stop. Because the family that once made me feel invisible was now looking straight at me. Not with love, but with dependence. And as her words sank in, the picture became clearer, darker, heavier than I expected. This wasn't just a small problem. This was collapse. She started explaining, piece by piece. Daniel's business hadn't just struggled, it had failed completely. Loans, bad investments, wrong decisions. Everything stacked against him. Creditors calling nonstop. Pressure closing in from every direction. The golden child had fallen. That alone was shocking. But it didn't stop there. My dad's condition was worse than she first said. Not just sick. Critical. Hospital visits turning into long stays. Treatments that cost more than they could afford. Bills piling faster than they could even process. And suddenly, the family that once looked untouchable looked fragile. Breaking. I listened in silence, letting every detail settle. The more she spoke, the more everything felt unreal. This was the same family that had everything under control. The same people who never needed me. Until now. And then came another twist. We tried everything, she said. We asked for help, but no one can support us anymore. No one. That word echoed differently. Because for the first time, they were out of options. And somehow, I had become the last one left. The daughter they ignored. The one they let walk away. Now, their only chance. I should have felt angry. Maybe even satisfied. This was the moment people imagine, when everything turns, when karma finally speaks. But the truth? It didn't feel like victory. It felt complicated. Because behind all the damage, all the pain, there was still something uncomfortable lingering. They weren't calling me because they finally saw me. They were calling me because they had no one else. And that realization hit harder than anything she had said. This wasn't about fixing a family. This was about surviving a crisis. And for the first time in years, I was standing right in the middle of it again. And standing there again, in the middle of something I thought I had left behind, the truth finally hit me in a way it never had before. Not slowly. Not gently. All at once. This was never about me. Not then. Not now. I replayed the call in my head. Every word. Every pause. Searching. Maybe there was something I missed. Some hidden care. Some regret buried underneath the urgency. But there wasn't. No, how have you been? No, we're sorry. No, we should have treated you better. Just problems. Just needs. Just me as a solution. And that realization cut deeper than anything from the past. Because for a moment, I almost believed things had changed. That maybe time had softened them. That maybe losing everything had made them see what they once ignored. But no. They didn't see me. They saw what I could give. And that difference shattered something inside me all over again. But this time, it didn't break me the same way. It woke me up. Because suddenly, everything made sense. Every silence. Every forgotten moment. Every time I felt invisible. It wasn't confusion anymore. It was a pattern. A truth I had tried too long to deny. I was never their priority. I was never their choice. I was their last option. And that was the most painful part. Not being hated. Not being rejected. But being remembered only when there was nothing else left. For a second, the old pain rushed back. Sharp. Familiar. Dangerous. But then, something stronger followed. Clarity. Because now I understood exactly where I stood. And this time, I wasn't going to forget it. And even with that clarity, something inside me refused to stay still. Because knowing the truth doesn't silence the feelings, it amplifies them. Two voices started fighting inside my head. Loud. Relentless. Opposite. One part of me was cold. Logical. Sharp. It reminded me of everything. Every forgotten birthday. Every ignored achievement. Every moment I stood there, waiting, and no one came. Don't do it, that voice said. They didn't choose you then. Why choose them now? And honestly, it made sense. But then, the other voice spoke. Quieter. Softer. But somehow heavier. It didn't talk about logic. It didn't bring up the past the same way. It spoke from somewhere deeper, the part of me that never fully healed. They're still your family. That sentence alone was enough to shake me. Because no matter how much time had passed, no matter how much I had built, that connection was still there. Faint, fragile, but real. And that's where it got dangerous. Because suddenly, I wasn't just deciding what to do. I was deciding who I was. Was I the girl who walked away and never looked back? Or the one who still turned around when they called? And the more I thought about it, the harder it became to breathe. Because both choices came with a cost. If I helped them, I risked reopening wounds I had spent years trying to close. If I didn't, I would carry that decision forever. And then came the moment that hit hardest. Not anger. Not pain. Guilt. Unexpected. Uninvited. Because despite everything, a part of me still wondered, what kind of person walks away when their family is falling apart? And just like that, the war inside me wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. And as that battle inside me grew louder, something else began to surface. Memories. Not the ones I chose to remember, but the ones I had buried. They came back suddenly. Sharp. Uninvited. I saw myself as a child again. Sitting at the dinner table, trying to join a conversation that was never meant for me. My voice small. Interrupted. Then gone. Another flash. My birthday. Sitting alone, staring at a cake that never came. Waiting for footsteps that never reached my door. Then another. Holding a certificate in my hands, heart racing, only to watch it disappear into silence seconds later. Each memory hit harder than the last. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just undeniable. And the worst part? They all felt the same. Empty. That emptiness wrapped around me again, tighter this time. Because now I wasn't just remembering, I was feeling it all over again. Every ignored moment. Every quiet rejection. Every time I learned to make myself smaller just to survive. And suddenly, the question changed. It wasn't, should I help them, anymore. It became, why do I still feel connected to people who never truly saw me? That realization shook something deep inside. Because it exposed a truth I didn't want to face. I wasn't holding on to them. I was holding on to the version of them I wished existed. The parents who would notice. The family who would choose me. But they were never real. And that truth hit harder than any memory. Because it meant one thing. If I went back, I wouldn't be returning to love. I would be walking straight back into the same silence I fought so hard to escape. And once I finally faced that truth, everything narrowed down to one question. Simple. Brutal. Impossible to ignore. What do I do now? Not what they need. Not what they expect. What do I choose? That question sat with me longer than anything else. It followed me through the day, into the night, into every quiet moment where there was no distraction left. Because for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was deciding. And that made it heavier. I thought about saying no. Just ending the call, blocking the number, protecting everything I had built. It would be easy. Clean. Safe. But then another thought slipped in. What if this is my only chance to finally close this chapter? Not for them. For me. And that changed everything again. Because suddenly, helping them wasn't about fixing the past. It was about facing it. But here's where it twisted one more time. Helping didn't mean going back. It didn't mean becoming who I used to be. It meant standing there, as who I am now. Stronger. Clearer. Untouchable. And that realization hit harder than anything before. I didn't have to choose between losing myself or losing them. I could choose myself and still decide what to do next. And just like that, the question shifted one last time. Not, should I help them? But, how do I help without losing myself again? And once I had my answer, there was only one thing left to do. Go back. Not as the girl who left, but as the woman I had become. The drive felt longer than it should have. Every mile pulling me closer to a place I had spent years trying to forget. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but inside, everything was shifting. When I finally pulled up, nothing had changed. Same house, same walls, same silence sitting behind the door. But I stepped out slowly, taking in every detail like it belonged to someone else's life. For a second, I hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of recognition. This was where everything began. And where everything broke. Then I knocked. The door opened almost immediately. My mom stood there. She looked smaller, tired. Not the woman I remembered. Her eyes widened for a second, like she wasn't sure if I was real. And just like that, time collapsed. But the feeling didn't come back. No warmth. No comfort. Just awareness. I walked inside. My dad was sitting down, weaker than I had ever seen him. Daniel stood in the corner, avoiding my eyes completely. The same people. But everything was different. And then it hit me. This wasn't my home anymore. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Not even in memory. I wasn't returning. I was visiting. And that realization changed the entire moment. Because suddenly, I wasn't the girl walking into a place that once hurt her. I was the one standing above it. Untouched. Unbroken. In control. And the moment I stepped fully inside, the tension became impossible to ignore. It wasn't loud. No one raised their voice. But it was there, thick, heavy, pressing in from every corner of the room. No one knew what to say first. So they just looked at me. My mom's eyes were already filling with tears, her hands nervously twisting together like she was searching for the right words. My dad avoided eye contact completely, staring down like he couldn't face what stood in front of him. And Daniel? He didn't even try. He stood there, silent, distant, like I was a stranger who had walked into the wrong house. That hit differently. Because for a second, it felt like nothing had changed at all. Same silence. Same distance. Just a different reason this time. Finally, my mom spoke. Her voice cracked, soft, almost fragile. She said my name, like it carried weight now. Like it finally meant something. But I didn't respond the way I used to. I didn't rush forward. I didn't soften. I just stood there. Watching. Waiting. And that's when the shift happened. Because for the first time, they were the ones uncomfortable. They were the ones unsure. They were the ones searching for something they didn't know how to ask for. And suddenly, the power in the room changed. Completely. My mom tried to explain, stumbling over her words, mixing apology with desperation, but it didn't land the way she expected. Not anymore. Because I wasn't that girl. Not the one who needed their approval. Not the one who would fill the silence for them. I let it stretch. Let them feel it. Every second of it. And in that silence, something undeniable settled in. They needed me. But they didn't know me anymore. And maybe that's why, when the words finally came out, they didn't sound the way I had imagined all those years. They weren't strong. They weren't demanding. They were breaking. My mom took a step closer, her voice trembling, eyes filled with something I had never seen before. Not control. Not expectation. Need. "Mia, please," she whispered. That word, please, hit harder than anything else in that room. Because I had never heard it from her before. Not once. She started talking quickly after that, like if she stopped, she wouldn't be able to continue. Explaining the debts, the hospital bills, the pressure closing in from every direction. Her hands shook as she spoke, her voice cracking with every sentence. My dad finally looked up, his expression tired, defeated. Daniel still said nothing, but his silence now felt different. Not distant. Ashamed. And then it came. The moment everything collapsed into a single sentence. We need you. No excuses. No justifications. Just truth. Raw. Unfiltered. And suddenly, the room felt smaller again, but not because of fear. Because of weight. Because those 3 words carried everything they had never said before. But here's the twist. They still didn't say they were sorry. And that absence was louder than anything else. Because even now, even at their lowest, they were asking for help, not offering healing. And in that silence, after everything was said and everything that wasn't, I finally spoke. Not immediately. Not impulsively. Carefully. I'll help. The words left my mouth calmly, almost too easily. And for a split second, no one moved. Then everything shifted. My mom exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. My dad closed his eyes, relief washing over his face. Even Daniel looked up, just for a moment, surprised, almost confused. It was like the entire room came back to life. Hope returned. But not for me. Because while they were feeling relief, I was feeling something else entirely. Control. For the first time in my life, I wasn't reacting to them. I wasn't chasing anything. I was choosing. And that difference changed everything. I could see it in their faces, the assumption. The quiet belief that things were going back to the way they used to be. That I would step back into the role they had always given me. The one who adjusts. The one who gives. The one who stays silent. But they didn't understand. Not yet. Because the version of me who needed them was gone. And that's when the moment twisted. Because my yes wasn't what they thought it was. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was a decision. A controlled one. A final one. And as the relief in their eyes grew stronger, they had no idea that everything was about to change. And just as that relief began to settle across their faces, I continued. Calm. Steady. Unshaken. But this time, it will be on my terms. The words landed differently. You could feel it. The shift. My mom's expression froze. My dad opened his eyes slowly, confusion replacing relief. Daniel's posture stiffened, like he finally realized this wasn't going to be simple. And for the first time, they were the ones unsure of what came next. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush. I just made it clear. I'll help with the debts. I'll take care of the medical bills. But that's where it ends. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. Because this wasn't what they expected. Not even close. I'm not moving back, I continued. I'm not becoming part of this house again. And I'm not pretending like nothing happened. Each sentence, more final than the last. You could see it breaking their expectations in real time. That illusion, that things would go back to how they were, shattered piece by piece. And then came the real twist. I'm helping because I choose to, not because I owe you. That line hit hardest. Because it removed everything they had once held over me. Guilt. Obligation. Control. Gone. For a second, no one spoke. Not even my mom. Because now the power wasn't just shifting. It had already shifted. Completely. They weren't asking anymore. They were accepting. And in that moment, something became undeniable. I wasn't the daughter trying to belong anymore. I was the one setting the boundaries. And whether they liked it or not, this was the only version of me they were ever going to get. And as my words settled into the room, the realization slowly began to sink in. Not all at once, Not dramatically, but undeniably. You could see it in their faces. That moment when expectation meets reality and loses. My mom's eyes shifted first. The desperation was still there, but now something else crept in. Understanding. Not full. Not comfortable. But enough. My dad leaned back slightly, like the weight of the situation had just doubled. Not because of the crisis, but because of me. Because for the first time, they were seeing something they never had before. Not the daughter they ignored, but the woman they couldn't control. And Daniel? He finally looked at me. Really looked. And in that one glance, everything changed. There was no superiority left. No distance. Just realization. And maybe regret. That was the moment it hit them. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't negotiable. This was real. The dynamic they had always known, the one where I adjusted, where I stayed quiet, where I accepted whatever they gave me, was gone. Completely. And nothing they said now could bring it back. The silence returned. But this time it felt different. Heavier. Because it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with truth. They had lost the version of me they never valued. And now, they were standing in front of the version they didn't know how to face. And once that truth settled between us, everything that followed became quieter. Not easier, just clearer. I didn't stay long that day. There was nothing left to explain. No need to revisit the past, no reason to fill the silence anymore. I had said what I needed to say. And for the first time, it was enough. But I kept my word. The next few weeks moved quickly. I handled the debts, transferred money, covered the hospital bills, spoke to doctors, arranged everything they couldn't. Efficient, direct, controlled. I became the solution. But not the daughter they remembered. Because every step I took had distance built into it. I didn't sit down for family dinners. I didn't stay to talk. I didn't open doors that had taken me years to close. I showed up when necessary. And left when it was done. Nothing more. At first, they tried. Small attempts. My mom asking if I wanted to stay longer. My dad trying to start conversations that felt years too late. Even Daniel, awkward, unsure, offering words that never quite formed. But I didn't step into it. Not again. Because I knew exactly where that path led. And I wasn't going back there. That was the real shift. Not the money. Not the help. The boundary. And the more I held it, the more they understood. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't something that would fade. This was who I was now. And here's the truth that changed everything. I wasn't helping to rebuild a family. I was helping without becoming part of it again. And that difference? That was my real power. And as everything finally settled, I realized something that no one ever tells you about stories like mine. The real victory isn't loud. It doesn't look like revenge. It doesn't even look like closure. It looks like peace. For so long, I thought winning meant proving them wrong, showing them what they lost, making them regret everything. But standing there, watching them struggle, watching them need me, I didn't feel powerful in the way I expected. I felt free. Because the truth is, the greatest form of revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. It's becoming someone who no longer needs them. That shift changes everything. Because when you stop chasing validation, you stop giving people the power to define you. When you stop waiting to be chosen, you realize you can choose yourself. And that's where it all turns. Not in anger. Not in pain. But in clarity. I wasn't the girl they ignored anymore. I was the woman who built a life without them, and still had the strength to stand in front of them without breaking. And here's the part that hits hardest. I didn't lose my family that day. I lost the need for them. And That was the moment I finally won. And maybe that's where my story stops, but yours begins. Because if you've listened this far, then something in this story touched you. Maybe not the same details. Maybe not the same people. But the feeling? Being unseen. Being unchosen. That part is real. So let me ask you something. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you walk away and never look back? Or would you return, knowing everything has changed? It sounds like a simple question, but it's not. Because the real decision isn't about them. It's about you. What you're willing to accept. What you're finally ready to let go of. And here's the twist no one expects. Sometimes, the hardest thing isn't leaving. It's choosing yourself, without guilt. So don't just watch this story. Think about it. Feel it. And then tell me. What would your ending look like? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm reading every single one.